Hello and welcome back to the Summer Series 2022 with Inspiring Workplaces in partnership with H&H. My name is Sophie and I am a client experience partner at H&H, where we blend our commitment to internal comms, which is backed up by science, and marry it with a dollop of common sense and a massive slice of creativity thrown in for good measure. Today is day 3 of this 3-week program where we have daily live talks showcasing learning, sharing and inspiration from our community around the world. We'll be here every day at the same time, so please do tune in. And as with all content from Inspiring Workplaces, we'll make sure it's all available on demand after today's session. If you are joining us live today, welcome. Please be assured that you have been automatically muted, but you do still have an opportunity to get involved. So join in the conversation and add your comments and any questions for our speaker, and we can cover those live today in the chat section. If you're joining on demand, please let's continue that conversation and feel welcome to contribute in the comments. So far this week, we've heard about workplaces taking employee wellbeing seriously and the importance of providing regular personal feedback. And today, I am very excited to hear our second case study, which is brought to you by Judy, dialing in from Chicago. Charlie is Chief People and Culture Officer from Intelligent Medical Objects, who were just awarded the number 2 spot in the top 50 inspiring workplaces across the whole of North America at the recent Inspire Summit last month in New York City. Sharing his wealth of knowledge after 30 years of experience in the HR sector, Charlie will be talking to us today on the power of the nudge, supporting managers and leaders to affect change more successfully by transforming human behaviour. So, Charlie, good morning to you. Welcome to the stage.
Good morning to you and to everybody on the call, or good afternoon, as I understand it. It sounds like you've got people coming in from all over the place.
We do. It's a lovely sunny afternoon here in London. So before we get started, I'm sure I'm not the only body wondering what exactly is an intelligent medical object. Would you be able to kick us off with our session today about that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the right way to do it is just to talk a little bit about the company, because I think it's important to talk about what an intelligent medical object is in the context of the broader healthcare community. We talk about ourselves as IMO. And we're about a 325, 350 person healthcare IT company. We're headquartered here in Chicago with probably half of our workforce now dispersed throughout the United States. Our software sits on pretty much all of the enterprise level electronic health records or electronic medical record systems, EHRs, EMRs, as a medical and clinical care terminology solution. So it helps clinicians and practitioners in the acute and ambulatory space really document a patient's symptoms and problems and related procedures while using doctor speak, without having to worry about or really be burdened by the complexities and the limitations of standardized medical coding systems that we all need for regulatory and billing purposes primarily. Our software also takes all of this language that doctors use or practitioners use and can normalize this patient data across systems, records and systems, so that it supports continuity of care, interoperability, and effectively allows providers more meaningful analytics to improve the quality of outcomes. So an object in our world is really just a word or a term that we use in the healthcare space.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Well, in that case, life-saving stuff indeed. Let's hear more about the power of the nudge.
Thank you. And again, welcome everybody. Thanks for having me be part of this. Have really loved our association with Inspiring Workplaces over the years. I'm certainly very proud of what our organization has done. We're about a 12, 15 year, really kind of depending on how you define it, organization, but we're also still very much a startup. We were funded substantially back in 2016. And so, for the last 6 years or so, we've really been growing into our shoes, our britches, and learning more about kind of who we are and who we need to be. I think all that we've done over the years to become an inspiring workplace has really been about what I call shared ownership and responsibility, a real responsibility for creating the kind of place that each and every one of our employees can thrive. It's a very individualized, individualistic activity. And that'll tie very closely into what I'm talking, or I'd like to talk today about with the nudge. We recognize that the science of people is complex. People and culture is complex, but that it doesn't really have to be difficult. It just has to be intentional. And what I'm going to go through today is so elementary. I mean, it may seem so elementary. I hope it doesn't seem so elementary that you leave feeling like it was a waste of your time. But it actually doing it and doing it consistently every single day is where we really think the magic is. And that is ultimately where organizations tend to fail. So I have watched the pendulum swing in the realm of people management, talent, culture, et cetera, over the last 30 years. I've seen, experienced, and influenced, maybe even good and bad, every trend under the sun for really what HR's role is in the organization. And as I approach the tail end of my career, this is kind of where my mind is. We and this is where I think our organization is really migrating towards, that this philosophy and approach to building the culture that works for our organization and ultimately drives success for the people in our business is kind of about helping our managers be better managers, excuse me. And that's it. Help them be better managers, and everything else kind of takes care of itself. Now, how you go about doing that, obviously there are lots of ways to go about doing that, but we're really starting to focus on probably the things that I tried to avoid over the years. This idea that, you know what, you kind of have to tell people what to do. This idea that you kind of have to hold a lot of hands. My idealism, this notion that we're all human beings, we're all adults, we all should be able to do the right thing. Like that had its place. I think it still has its place, but it also doesn't always result in the kinds of things you'd like to see in your business. The reality is that, you know, we don't get the kinds of things done that we'd like to get done, that we assume are getting done, through the people out there that are ultimately responsible for doing it. Now, again, there's lots of reasons for that, not the least of which is that life happens. This thing called work actually kind of gets in the way. Like, I mean, the day job that we're all hired and paid to do, while it likely includes a number of bullet points around how we take care of our people, those bullet points often, all too often, fall to the bottom of the long list. And so we have competing priorities. We have limited resources. We are, unfortunately, sometimes conflict avoidant. We're drawn to the things that we know will produce immediate results, satisfaction. I mean, the reality is that we all have the best of intentions, and we're all smart. Most of us, at least, are all really smart. But it's just hard to do some of these things every single day. The little things that actually can make a tremendous difference. And so when it comes to how we fuel the best of all possible employee experiences in your organization, you got to really start with recognizing the difference between what really is, and what you know ought to be. And unfortunately, more often than not, those two things can be entirely different. So why? I mean, again, there are lots of problems and and excuses for poor management in the workplace. They're endless. I'm convinced it comes down to one thing, and that's cognitive load. There's only so much our tiny little brains can manage in the course of a day. And our people managers of all of the roles that we have in our organization, those people have things that are sucking on their bandwidth and their CPUs all day long. It is quite literally exhausting. And so again, to assume that the simple things are getting done is where we make our first and maybe even biggest mistake. President Obama, former President Obama of the United States, said in a Vanity Fair interview with Michael Lewis that you'll see I wear only gray or blue suits. I'm trying to pare down decisions. I don't want to make decisions about what I'm eating or what I'm wearing because I have too many other really important decisions to make. And I think that's kind of what we're hoping to solve for here. Let's help our managers make decisions that are important, but that they don't have to expend a lot of cognitive load around. Or let's help protect them from the things that eat away at it. And enter, therefore, the nudge. That's kind of the concept that allows us to do that. I apologize for the way that this looks. It looks like maybe the upload didn't happen exactly how we wanted it to, but I think you can still read it and get the point. For our purposes, we think about the nudge like almost like this butterfly effect, which I'm sure you all know, or at least familiar with in chaos theory, this phenomenon whereby a small, tiny, minute, localized change in what is otherwise a highly complex system can have large effects elsewhere. And this concept actually, I think, really applies incredibly well, relevantly in the world of work. We believe that we can make tremendous differences in how our employees experience work by influencing those experiences one employee at a time, changing behaviors one employee at a time, creating moments one employee at a time, literally. And all it takes is a little push, not a shove, but a nudge in a direction which helps them do the right thing, make the right decision, change their way of thinking, acting, behaving, fill in the blank. But someone has to be diligent and intentional about giving that little push, that nudge. It has to be someone's job. And we are increasingly thinking about our people and culture team, our HR team, as the leaders of that role, as playing that role, as that being an explicit part of their job. And we spend a lot of time looking for opportunities to quite simply nudge. So this is kind of our nudge, philosophy, mission, whatever. Very simple. Again, anything I'm sharing with you today cannot be acted on immediately, or can be acted on immediately. So one, remind managers of the small yet really powerful things that they can do every single day to positively impact employee experience. Two, make it easy for them to do it, like really easy. And then hold them accountable for it. That's it. That's the nudge. That's our mission. No, we don't spend all day, every day doing these things. But again, we look for opportunities as much and as often as we can to do them. Here's the trick, or here's something to think about as we think about nudges in general. One, if in order for it to count as a nudge, the employer manager interventions, they have to be easy and they have to be cheap. Two, and this is crucial, they cannot be a mandate. They must not be a mandate. So as an example, if you want your people to simply eat healthier, making fresh fruit or vegetables more available, more prominent in your cafe or break room by putting them at eye level, like that's a nudge. But banning junk food, that doesn't count as a nudge. Nudges are about influencing choice, not about dictating it. And the goal is not to replace decision making, but to replace thoughtlessly or poorly designed experiences. That's all. We're trying to tweak those experiences. Rocket science, absolutely not. But here's the trick. Here's the really big trick. That nudge should be centered around, mostly because if you do not, then your nudges start to get really noisy. They start to get really distracting. They start to be very frustrating. But they should be centered around this kind of general class or attribute or behavior that you know causes superior performance, creates superior performance in your workplace, in or on that team, in or on that location, in or on that function. It has to be based in something that is actually already known or proven or understood to create superior performance in your workplace. So how do you do that? Well, there's lots of ways. We spend a lot of time paying attention to what Laszlo Bock, former CHRO for Google, the quote that we referenced earlier from his book, Work Rules. We spend a lot of time focused on what he refers to as the two tails. And that's your very bottom performers and your very top performers. And we try to understand what's different about those two groups. We try to understand what are those very top performers doing differently or not doing, for that matter, than your bottom performers. How do you start to distinguish real, actionable differences in those kinds of behaviors? There's lots of ways to do that. I'm sure many of you do surveys. If you don't, you probably should in some form or fashion. That's something that we could spend, again, an entire webinar talking about. For us, I mean, we really believe that 95% of missed opportunities and lingering problems in the workplace can be addressed simply by having better conversations. And that's what we do with our managers. So tell me about what you do to be so effective in fill in the blank, X. It is about identifying those little things that we can then use as nudges effectively for the rest of the organization. We kind of refer to this as white glove. That's kind of our name for it. Yes, it requires attention. Yes, you must in many ways become a concierge. It's time consuming, sure, but only incrementally. And we would argue that the personalized attention at the front end of everything creates the kind of fluidity and flow in your workforce that ultimately relaxes the pressure on your people systems over time. We do it one manager at a time, again, literally. Yes, we have company-wide programs, but we often roll those out on multiple occasions, in multiple iterations, in multiple ways, in different ways. down to the team level, because what simply works for one does not work for the other. Of course, you all understand that. And most of the time, again, it simply just means a conversation, a better conversation. It doesn't require a 30-page document or program guide or PowerPoint presentation or webinar or the coordination of calendars of 35, 40, 50 people across the organization. It's just about having those conversations. We spend time with one manager here and there throughout the day giving nudges, reminders to do things which otherwise would have been neglected, suggestions for conversations that they themselves could have with their people, information that they may want to disseminate, share, or kind of ask their people to consume. All of that requires a great deal of trust and credibility and, respect. And to get to a place where your people will actually answer the phone when you call. But if your HR team hasn't already instilled that kind of trust and credibility, then I say go find new ones. Go find new HR people. Again, none of this is rocket science, and it shouldn't have to be. That's exactly the point. That is the only thing I want you all to take away from this, is that if you change the behavior on one manager today, if you get them to do one thing that they wouldn't have otherwise done, that will have an impact on somebody in the organization, then you have made an impact. So I know that by standards of time, we're probably running out of it. So I'm just going to share with you and these are purposely meant to be very elementary examples, because again, this is elementary. We know that the managers who have been most successful in getting their people back into the office, we're all struggling with that right now. At what rate? At what pace? Do we mandate it? How often do we do it? So on and so forth. We've thrown all that stuff aside. What we've started with is a shared value and belief that getting human beings to spend time together is important for us. That the energy one gains simply by being in the room with another of their species, whether or not they're innovating or creating or even problem solving, is maybe more valuable than anything else. And side note, I think we in the world of work have completely undervalued the biological, the physiological needs to interacting with people. But we make that value known and leave it at that. And then we nudge our managers along the way to make it happen. Sure, we create events. Sure, we come up with larger scale gatherings, but we also just pick up the phone and say, hey, let's take a look at your calendar next week. What do you got going on? Any way you could do that one in the office? Let's just try it. Let's see who can come in. Doesn't matter if everybody can or not, but let's do it. We've now done this again and again and again. And while you do it at the front end with maybe a little bit more effort, it starts to take care of itself. We're watching the trend in how people show up in the workplace, how often they do, and the bell curve is starting to move. More and more people are showing up more and more, not because we told them to, not because we threw a mandate down on the table, but because managers were nudged to start doing the kinds of things that we already know have been successful in getting people back into the office. You can apply this to so many things. Feedback, of course. We know that those managers who are best at delivering meaningful feedback are the ones who do it daily. We literally call managers and say, hey, I know Jimmy's struggling. Have you had an opportunity to talk to him today? No. What's the one thing you need him to do to be more effective? Did you tell him that? How'd you tell him? You didn't tell him? How can we help you? Can we write it for you? Can we schedule something for you? Can we give you some speaking notes? But let's have the conversation. If you're doing that with one manager a day, and I won't do the math that we do internally, but you'll be amazed by how often you get to cycle through that kind of activity. Again, it takes intention, it takes a little bit of effort, and it takes some accountability. But it doesn't take a new performance management system. It doesn't take a fandangled app that buzzes you to remind you to say something to your friend today. It takes a human being dropping a text or picking up the phone. That's literally as easy as it can be. We measure what behaviors show up and what don't a lot in our organization. One of them is whether or not our people feel like they'll be recognized for their excellent work, or they agree that they'll be recognized for their excellent work. We know that the managers who get the most employees or more employees who say, I absolutely agree, or I agree that I know I will be recognized for excellent work, they do some things. They're the ones that show appreciation in really authentic and open and personal ways. They're not relying on a reward and recognition program. They pick up the phone and say thank you. And so we help other managers pick up the phone and say thank you. What would you say to somebody to say thank you today? Who is that person? What did they do? Can we help you do that? We have IMO swag you can share with people. We do handwritten thank you notes. We post things in our Teams channels that we may end up writing for people. We have a podcast, internal podcast that we do, and sometimes those people that have done amazing things get invited to be a guest on that podcast to talk more about what they've done, to share with the world. Side note, Snappy is a really cool kind of swag management app out there. We use it all the time for lots of things, and we use it to give little nudges around things, even that we want people to do just from like a compliance perspective. Yes, they should do it because it's their job, but again, get over that. Sometimes they need a nudge, and a new sweatshirt with an IMO logo is not a bad way to give that nudge. Learning, we do the same thing with learning. Hey, so-and-so we notice hasn't spent a whole lot of time on LinkedIn Learning this month. Can we help out with that? What are you hoping that they're spending their time getting better at? We'll curate a learning plan for them. We'll find the content. We'll find the coursework. We'll put it together, and all we do is send them a link. Hey, your manager asked that you spend some time on this. Or we help the manager announce that and kind of hold everybody accountable to it. You get the idea. Here's some things to keep in mind. They need to be timely. Nudges need to be timely. They need to be relevant. They need to be simple to put in action. You guys get that already. Use convincing facts. You use data to support what you're asking people to do. We know that the managers that do this have a X% higher score in this area than, so on and so forth. You can do that all the time. Checklists are not sexy. And if I ever thought I'd be talking to a crowd about checklists 10 years ago in my career, I would have probably stuck a pen in my eye. But they are, like it or not, really, really powerful. They can be, at least, even if, especially if you make them kind of patronizingly simple. Do this, do this, do this. Nudge the manager, but also nudge the employee. I think you saw on one of the earlier slides that when we're talking about performance or getting feedback, we talk to the manager, but then we also talk to the employee. Have you asked for feedback? Why not? How can we help you do that? Hit it from both ends. It's a fail-safe, and you're holding yourself accountability. We do experimentation. We A/B test all the time. If we're doing a nudge to an email, we may try an email that's worded one way and an email that's worded another, and we'll see which gets the most activity. Again, don't take away or force choices. Just make it easier for your managers to make good choices. All of this, the butterfly effect, the simple steps, we're building muscle memories. Those can be contagious. These nudges can be contagious. They literally become the kind of the pay it forward of the workplace. At least they do at IMO. That's my spiel on nudge. I think I did take a little bit more time than I was allotted, and I hope it was useful.
Super. Thanks very much, Charlie. Now, I'll give everyone a couple of minutes if they want any final questions or comments in the chat. I think I have just one comment and one question for you. I think it was really lovely what you said earlier in that presentation, that this is about replacing the thoughtlessly designed experience. And I think that you kind of essentially made the case for internal comms, haven't you? You know, internal communication at its core is to design a thoughtful experience for everybody, so that, you know, it's not something that's just done as a reaction, it's planned and it's cared for. What I would ask you is, I understand that, you know, this is, in an ideal world, all HR managers should be doing this all the time as part of their, you know, daily practices. But I can imagine that some teams might feel that, you know, especially with sort of, you know, challenging workloads, it might feel that this is another thing to do. If you could say to an HR team, you know, if you do one thing only to get this power of the nudge moving, what would that one thing be?
You know, again, we're not talking about anything that takes a lot of time or a lot of effort. We're talking about a phone call and a conversation 9 out of 10 times. I would say be methodical about it. Like, plan it as part of your day. You know, we have HR team members who use an hour, block it out. That's my nudge hour. I'm just going to nudge. And every day could be different. I could spend all of that hour with one manager who needs a whole lot of help getting that nudge. I could spend 5 minutes with 20 managers. The math on that didn't work out, but you get it. Like, you know, you got to recognize that it's important enough to make time for. You got to compartmentalize that time. You got to make it sacred, and then you got to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Scheduled and methodical. Excellent. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everybody for joining us live. And if you're watching this post live, please do keep your comments coming in, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day in Chicago. And to everyone in England, hope you have a lovely weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.